Each day, the man swings his halberd 25,000 times, just to give the sky a middle parting. Through countless days and nights of training, the broken halberds at his feet have piled up into a small mountain. Finally, one day, he stood at the world's peak, with only the final challenge remaining before him. The Fangtian halberd in his hand couldn't bear the immense power, turning to dust. Only then did Lu Bu realize he was invincible, destined to never meet his match. This ultimate move, Heavenly Strike, might never be used. So Lu Bu, melancholic, went to his grave with regret. However, this time he was resurrected by a Valkyrie, as if to fulfill his last wish. Lu Bu is about to face the strongest Norse god, Thor. Can he, a mere mortal, kill a god? Not long ago, humanity faced its greatest crisis. The gods, seeing the destruction humans caused, had Zeus decide to lead their annihilation. This statement drew agreement from all the gods present. Even the most beautiful goddess Aphrodite nodded in approval. However, just as the withered old man was about to bring down his hammer of judgment, a dissenting voice stood up to object. She was Brunhilde, the half-human, half-god Valkyrie. Under the strange gazes of all the gods, she became the first rebel against the divine side. It seems humanity has another way, using the divine code's terms as a contract, then declaring war on the gods. Both sides will send representatives for 13 one-on-one battles. The first to 7 wins is the victor. This will be a life or death battle for humanity's survival. But the difference was so great it seemed humanity was doomed to fail before the war, so the gods thought it was a ridiculous joke and showed their contempt. But then Hilda spoke up to mock them at this moment. Hearing this, the gods present instantly raged, tearing space and time, shattering the floor. What kind of joke are you playing, you false god? Zeus directly brought down his hammer of judgment, then pointed at Brunhilde. Since you insist on seeking death, then you choose the human warriors. But in reality, Brunhilde already had her candidates in mind. The 13 people she chose were all the most brilliant stars in the long river of human history, including even Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. A battle between gods and men commenced. However, for just the first fight, the gods sent their strongest Norse god, Thor. His entrance not only drew cheers from the divine audience, but also showed their firm resolve to win. Now, turning to the human side, it's the strongest warrior chosen by the Valkyries from 7 million years of human history. With drums shaking the heavens, the one who arrives is Lu Bu, Lu Fengxian, the greatest warrior among men, invincible on foot, on horseback, or anywhere. It seems both sides are giving their all to win this grudge match. As the battle began, their weapons clashed within 0.1 second. The arena floor instantly collapsed, kicking up huge clouds of dust. Yet in their first probing clash, Thor gained no advantage in strength. Realizing this mortal was no common ant, Thor's eyes grew serious. He first gathered electricity in his hands, then, in a strange posture, inverted Mjolnir. Though it seemed a simple move, the humans there had no idea Thor once, with this single strike, annihilated 66 colossal beasts that invaded the god's capital. This was the true way to wield Mjolnir. As the hammer swung, like an ancient weapon's awakened sharpness, space and time were condensed to their extreme, and violent power exploded instantly. Yet when all thought Lu Bu was surely defeated, the next moment, a strange look appeared in Thor's eyes. Lu Bu clearly stood up. Such unparalleled power couldn't defeat him. A god's body was torn open by a mortal. If not for the hot divine blood splattering everywhere as proof, no one present would believe what they saw was real. But Thor didn't care about his wounds, instead feeling a touch of pity for Lu Bu. If their factions aligned, perhaps they could have been friends. Their shared essence as proud solitary heroes created a mutual respect. If Lu Bu had met Thor in his own time, he wouldn't have been so bored after conquering the world that he'd let Cao Cao capture and kill him. At this moment, the gods remained quite confused, for mortal weapons they knew could not harm them. They never imagined that before the fight, the Valkyrie had arranged for 11 fellow warriors, excluding herself, to sacrifice their forms to forge divine weapons for mankind that could wound gods, thus bridging the gap between humans and deities.
It's party time.
Lu Bu was finally defeated by his own mortal body. The Thunder Hammer's immense 10,000-ton force couldn't fell him, but his mortal leg bones couldn't bear the heavy load. Despite his heart's great unwillingness, he couldn't stop the blood from seeping from his legs. Thor looked at Lu Bu with admiration, deciding to grant him a dignified death. But at that moment, Red Hair galloped over, wanting to live and die with Lu Bu. He licked Lu Bu's leg, then nodded, signaling his master to mount. Lu Bu saw the resolve to die in his eyes. Nearby, soldiers and Deputy General Chen Gong formed a human wall, cheering him on. Yet just as everyone thought Lu Bu couldn't fight, he surprisingly stood up, forcing his body. He let out an angry roar, making the entire human crowd erupt. Even Thor showed a cruel smile. Then Lu Bu leapt onto his horse's back. Man and steed became one. Red Hair moved, galloping wildly around Thor. The moment Thor made a battle reaction, Lu Bu suddenly changed his grip, reversing his hold on the halberd's shaft. This was Lu Bu's deadliest move, never used on anyone else. To master this move, Lu Bu swung it millions of times, through all seasons, day and night. His broken halberds piled up like a small mountain, until one day, Lu Bu split even the very air, and the celestial palace trembled. In fact, this wasn't even Lu Bu's full strength, because ordinary halberds simply couldn't fully withstand this power. Believing this move could never be used on anyone, Lu Bu named this solitary technique Tiansun. And now, the strongest weapon will combine with Lu Bu's most powerful move, unleashing all its might without reservation upon Thor. Lu Bu knew this strike would be the most magnificent of his life. His facial muscles contorted with extreme excitement, and his feet, using leverage, gripped Red Hair's flanks. At this moment, Thor hurled his hammer once more. The hammer flew into the air, reaching its peak, then rapidly spun and circled. Lu Bu charged towards Thor at full speed. The instant Thor seized Mjolnir harnessing his might, Lubu for the first and last time unleashed Tiansum. Thor with full power swung the awakened Mjolnir in reply. Their twisted forms were surprisingly unified then, like a single deity. As a towering golden beam erupted, the atmosphere ripped open, revealing stars. The battlefield's light was too dazzling to behold, with gods and humans still locked in a fierce struggle. The moment the golden light faded, Lubu's body was torn apart, and the Valkyrie, transformed into the divine halberd, reverted to her true form. Lubu was utterly defeated, but it wasn't quite over. He bit off his mangled, ruined arm. Since he'd given his all, this rebirth wasn't in vain. Scars on his back were a man's disgrace, so he clamped his legs on red hair again, charging Thor with a noble resolve to die. Thor understood and delivered a blow that granted Lubu dignity. Finally, the gods won the first round of the human god war. Though Thor won the battle, he felt no excitement, as it seemed he'd lost a dear friend.